And we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's on .NET Live. My name is Cecil Phillip. And today we have a very special guest. We have Brian Dougles from GitHub. He's going to be talking to us about some of the cool things that you can do with GitHub that you may not have known about. So I think this is going to be really fun. Feel free to go ahead and drop your questions inside of the chat. We'll be monitoring the questions as we go along, as always. And if you have anything you want to let Brian know about or ask him, then we'll see if we can answer it live on camera. But before we get into it, Brian, why don't you, for folks that not met you before, maybe they've never seen your streams or any of your content before, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
For sure. Yeah, so I'm Brian Dougles. I go by BDougieYo on Twitter and BDougie on GitHub and YouTube and all those other places. And my day job is Director of Developer Advocacy at GitHub, something like Developer Advocate, DevRel. That's kind of like that is my day job. And I really am focused on trying to get people to engage GitHub in ways maybe you weren't aware. Try to give out tips and tricks on YouTube and blogs, and also build little side projects as well. So that's kind of the gist of it. And I do live stream on Twitch every Wednesday and Friday, focused on a project called Open Sauce, which we'll get into way more detail later, but essentially a project to find your next open source contribution.
Awesome. And I know a lot of us as developers today, it's hard to not interact with GitHub. I meet very few people that haven't at least heard about what it is, or have used code or projects from there, or even just sometimes I know folks that just go on GitHub to search for source code to look for examples, right? I know everyone has a different use case, but I'm definitely interested to hear about some of the things that you have to say. But again, quickly before we dive into that, at this part of the show, this is where I usually like to give a quick shout out to all of our folks that are watching, all of our attendees, all of our guests. We have folks from all over the world that always watch the show, and we always appreciate you all being here from wherever it is from the world that you're watching from. So I'm just going to take a look really quickly, see where folks are coming from. Looks like Paul, we got Paul Watts. Paul is from Tasmania, Australia. So they've definitely shout out to Australia. We got Pakistan, Brazil's in the house. Shout out to Brazil. The UK is here. Barbados. What else we got? The Netherlands is in here. Who else we got? Yeah, there you go. The Netherlands, Australia, tons of different folks, right? So as always, we always appreciate you all coming in here, particularly our regulars, man. We have some folks that are regulars that are here almost every week. Definitely got to give a shout out to Jose. Jose is here, I swear, every week. Not even just every week, but every show, every week. Jose is here and he's asking really cool questions. So I definitely want to let him know I appreciate him. I appreciate all of you that are here and always giving us some love. And hopefully we create content that you like, because if you didn't like it, then, there's really no point in us being here. Now, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share some links, and let's take a look at some of the cool things that have been going on on the internet. So first thing I want to share with you. So this is a blog post actually written by a friend of mine, Aaron Stannard, who is the CEO of Petabridge. He also runs the Akka.net project. And he wrote this really interesting blog post around software architectures that reduce technical debt. Now, we all know what technical debt is and how much of a pain it can be, particularly as a software project matures. So what he's doing here is he's outlining some really interesting techniques and things you should think about as you're trying to minimize your technical debt over time. And I know he's working on a part 2 to this blog post. I don't think it's out yet, but whenever it is, I'll definitely make sure that we share it so folks will be able to take a read and check that out too. Next thing I want to share really quick this week, .NET 6 release candidate 2. So this was released. This is going to be the last release candidate, I believe. I hope so. Before release .NET 6 proper, which will be coming out in November. So if folks have been waiting to see what the final set of features are going to be and what they're going to look like in ASP.NET Core, in C# 10 and all those types of things, this would definitely be a good release for you to go ahead and check out. In this particular blog post, we have Dan Roth, who's a program manager on the ASP.NET team, and he's talking about some of the things that are happening in the world of Blazor and Razor Pages and things of that nature. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check that out. I mean, I think there's also ones for EF Core and then .NET Core 6 proper as well. Okay, now let's talk about events. We got a couple events that are coming up. DapperCon, which should be really fun if folks are interested in learning about Dapper. So DAPR, Distributed Application Runtime, which is a really cool, fun project, open source, that makes it a lot easier for you to write microservices. If you're interested in learning about microservices and how you can deploy your .NET solutions, or maybe even your mixed platform solutions with Dapper, definitely make sure you check out DapperCon. It's going to be the 19th and 20th. So that's next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. And you know what? It's free too. So literally all you have to do is like go and click on the calendar placeholder, and then you'll be able to get notified whenever that's happening. Next one we want to talk about is NETconf. We've been talking about this every week. I'm pretty sure everyone knows when this is by now. But NETconf 2021, November 9th through 11th, the release of .NET 6, tons of community sessions, tons of sessions from the team. The agenda should be out now. There's the local events, there's digital swag, there's all these cool things. Head over to .NETconf.net to learn more and save the date. And this link is actually from Brian. He let me know that GitHub Universe is also happening this month in October 27th to 28th. And so for folks that may not be familiar with GitHub, I don't know, Brian, do you want to talk about this for
Yeah. This is our premier conference. So GitHub, we host a conference every year. It's called Universe. And it's an opportunity for us to talk about some new features, talk about features we're launching the day of. So if you have any interest in things like code spaces, Copilot, GitHub Actions, we'll have some announcements around all those features there.
That's awesome. And then this looks like this is a free conference as well, right? So
yes,
folks could go ahead and click the register button, and you could also get notified whenever this happens. I'm not going to go through the registration right now, but you guys can go ahead and
save the time. I would also say the registration is really there for the on-demand sessions. So if you want to get in tune with the on-demand sessions, and we'll have some live workshop opportunities. Those are limited seats, so register for that. But the keynote itself, you can just watch that from that website or from the YouTube or wherever else we're streaming it from.
Awesome. All right, that sounds good. Now, this is part of the show where I said this is no longer the Cecil show. This is now Brian's show. So Brian, I'm going to switch over to your screen, and we're going to talk about let's talk about GitHub, right? And what GitHub does.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think a good place for us to start would be, kind of like we were saying in the beginning, a lot of developers interact with GitHub in some way or the other. You know what I mean? They go to the website to browse things, or they push stuff there, or they use it as their version control thing. But from your perspective, I feel like GitHub is deeper than that, right? Like what would you actually say GitHub is, or what does it mean to the community of developers that it supports?
That's a great question, because GitHub it's a power tool, basically. It's like with a lot of these the tech and the tools that we leverage, it's different for each person. But if I basically to summarize it, GitHub's a place where the world puts their code. So we're seeing right now we're all still remote. I don't know if you're working inside of an office now, but I'm not. And the one thing I've actually been benefited from even during the pandemic is that I have access to collaborate with my team remotely, asynchronously. So we have repositories of code. I was just pairing with my teammate earlier to do some automation for one of our organizations. And that's what GitHub is. It's a place for folks to collaborate and connect their code to other folks. And sometimes that sort of surfaces in our code day to day at work, but this also surfaces in open source. And open source is something that I love talking about and getting folks engaged with, and kind of explaining those some of the beginning concepts for as well.
You know how back in the day, and I'm going to date myself now, but back in the day, folks used to learn jQuery before they learned JavaScript. I feel like I learned GitHub before I learned Git, because I wanted to use GitHub, right? So I learned, I did it backwards, I guess, if that makes sense. And I feel like I'm still learning it too, because there's a lot of things that are inside of there that I'm just like, oh, that's how that works. I didn't know there was that operator. But I feel like that's how profound GitHub is for me, right? Like it's such a tool, like you said, for being able to collaborate with folks, being able to share knowledge also, and then being able to just discover what the community, what's kind of like the community pulse. What are people working on? What do they care about? I like to go into that trending section on the website under Explore, and just see, what are the folks in Go and Python and .NET working on, and kind of just peruse through there a little bit. So that's always a fun thing for me to do.
Yeah, and like that trending site, you can actually find from clicking explore. So the beauty of like, and this is dark mode, is something that I prefer. So hope everybody's enjoying this.
That's fine.
But yeah, so on the explore side, like I'm actually tracking a couple projects for like topics for COVID-19 because I was really interested in that early in the pandemic. Some other projects around Ruby, Go, React, things I use on a day-to-day basis. I like to actually go and see what's happening here. So like that's a great place to look for. But what you mentioned, which we do have a newsletter, so you could sign up for the newsletter and get all the top trending projects, like things that are sort of popping off during the week. You can also see that list here. So looks like there's some, I don't know what all this stuff, a lot of ML stuff, it seems like, and some Electron Builder. But yeah, it's just nice to see like what's happening across GitHub, because GitHub's 200 million. The previous website I was showing is the GitHub homepage. 200 million plus repositories worldwide on the platform. So there's a lot happening, but kind of hard to like, if you just wanted to keep up the tabs, like there's not like, just like Reddit, there's no GitHub homepage. It's for you to see all that. And that's what the explore page is today.
Awesome. Now, I know you have a cool project that you had mentioned in your intro called Open Sourced, right? I almost said open source, but Open Sourced. So what do we talk about this? Like what is this? What is this project about?
Yeah, and it's intentional. It's funny because this is a project to find your next open source contribution. This is a project that serves my need. So it's just a side project, scratching an itch. It's not all things to everybody. So like if you don't find a feature that you think it should be in here, let me know. I can work on it, or we can open an issue. Maybe someone else wants to contribute to that. But a couple years ago, I wanted to learn how to use the GitHub GraphQL API, and that's what this is. It's built on top of GitHub's API. And like to sort of summarize this with the Gucci Mane quote, which is, if you don't got sauce, then you lost. I personally got involved and I got my first job because I was doing a lot of open source work, and I built an entire project with only open source tools and material out there and documentation. And I've never contributed back. And I had a time like a couple years later after that, I wanted to contribute back to projects, find projects to work on. And this is sort of fulfilling that dream of like being able to easily say, hey, you can go to the trending page, but like, what if you just specifically just looking for like React projects? Or what if you just want to like a community of folks who are like-minded, who are looking for open source? Like, how do we centralize that? And the way we do that today is like, we have a Discord. So a lot of my features I wish I could build are really just Discord channels. So like there's a project sharing. So if you want to share your project and you get contributors, definitely hit up the Discord for that. But we do have some other integrations like scheduled reminders. So if you wanted to get notified of like when projects open up good first issues, we have an integration with Code Triage, which some people might be familiar with, some people might not. So I'm going to hit login and then quickly go into this. I got to stop showing this project because I don't think this is GPL licensed correct. But Cloudflare basically rebuilt Doom, which is the GPL. What gave us GPL from John Carmack. They built it in WebAssembly. So I've got this little project, and usually what happens to me is I'll find the project either on the trending page or on Hacker News or on Twitter and be like, that's a cool project. I'm going to save that for later. And like the easiest thing to do is go into the project and hit this little star, which I've already done. And then now I have a list of all the projects. If I go to my account, actually, if I go to github.com/stars, I can go see all the projects I've starred. So here's a project I was working on earlier. Here's another project I'll talk about in a sec. This is a CLI command to built in Go to have cheat sheets. So like a Git cheat sheet. So you had mentioned that you don't know, like you didn't know the details of Git, but you knew GitHub. That's what this project is for, is to get really cool cheat sheets up and running. But going back to your original question in open source, like I just have all these built-in features instead of jumping all around the place. Start a repo, fork the repo, set up code triage notifications here, find new contributions here. I even have a note-taking session, which I do have a PR. We actually have a PR open to fix this right here. So everybody who's cringing at this UI, it'll get fixed. We just wanted to give an easy underhand pitch during Hacktoberfest. But yeah, so you take notes on repos. I can also go into this repo and check out good first issues, which they don't have any because it's such a small project, not a great example. But any project on GitHub, if you go to /contribute, you'll actually get some good first issues. So if I went to, I don't know, how is it .net? .net?
I think it is. So I think if you want the runtime, it'll be .net/runtime. If you want to do ASP.NET, it'll be .net/.
Yeah, of course. I knew that answer, but you know, while you're doing it live, you're always going to make the mistake. So it looks like runtime doesn't have any good first issues.
Yeah, the runtime is a very complex piece of software, so I get it.
I imagined. Let's actually go to ASP and go to contribute, and we'll roll the dice and see if this works.
They should have a couple at least. Yeah, there you
excellent.
Go.
They have a ton. So this is a feature, and we'll start with the whole. You probably didn't know this about GitHub. Any repo /contribute, as I just went to every like repo that I could think of off the top of my head, type in /contribute at the end, and it'll give you all good first issues that are unassigned. And this is something that usually a lot of folks recommend. Hey, just go grab some good first issues. And usually what happens is someone's already working on it. Because like if it's a good project, these things get picked up pretty quickly. So if you just want to get like, some Blazor stuff, great little add-on and integration into the ASP.NET stuff. Just jump on there and grab it. And you can actually just cycle through rather than look at 2.3 thousand issues, which is absolutely mind-boggling, but it happens when you get the project this size. Right. Rather than filter here, you can just have a pre-built filter here, as well as a link to the contributing guidelines as well. So if you want to contribute to this project, you got a link right here, and you're good to go.
But that's already a new thing. Like I didn't know that was there. I know about there's a site called Up for Grabs, and usually when I look for things to contribute to, like I go to Up for Grabs, but that's a separate website. Yeah. So it's good to know that this is like built into GitHub, and I don't have to go to Up for Grabs.
Yeah, and it's funny, and I probably spelled it wrong. Up for Grabs, Scott Hanselman. Everybody knows Scott. If you're doing .NET, you probably are familiar with Scott Hanselman. It was like one of his original ideas. It used to be tweets that he would send out, or I'm not sure where the original place where he'd just have the ups for grabs, but encourage community to add a label called ups for grabs to their issues. And what would happen is they would just grab this and then centralize it into one website. So kind of similar to what I'm doing with open source, which I'm actually working on a project that is kind of similar, but kind of different, which we have time. I can talk about that in the discussion that I have. But yeah, so this has been realized. There's also like good first issue .dev. You can see I've already it's in my history. Nice. Another good one. So instead of up for
and you can filter by project, which is cool.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So if you wanted to look for Vue projects because you're in the JavaScript, there you go. 10 issues ready to be grabbed. So there's a lot of like really cool projects like this that sort of centralize the stuff. And I think what happened with GitHub is like we took notice of this. So a couple of years ago in 2020, we shipped that one feature to see good first issues and ups for grabs and consolidate it onto the platform to be able to surface that stuff. So that's what that is.
Awesome. That looks good. Like our friend Paul. So Paul is from Tasmania in Australia. He's saying, I've been using GitHub since it started, and I've already learned some new cool stuff. So that's beautiful to hear, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I also have an issue. Sorry, I have an issue. I have a little feature. If you want to filter by good first issues, it used to be an issue, but now it's a solved feature. Yeah. You can actually filter just for good first issues. So anything that is encompassed of ups for grabs, good first issues, they exist here. Or documentation is another one we sort of embed in that too as well. Got it. But yeah.
So then, so for this particular website, that means that like this is your account, right? But like if I go to this account and sign in with my GitHub, then now like all the things that I start would show up there. Then I could kind of start using it to filter out what are the projects I care about and what are some of the things that I want to contribute to, pretty much.
Yeah. And like the gimmick is that you won't have a bunch of stuff down here. Your stars. So the way this is built, your stars show up here. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted a reminder of what projects you're interested in, if I click this button, now, actually, that was much faster than I thought it was going to be. So basically, what this is doing right now is actually adding MC Foley's compliance action to my list. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I was going to get to, which it's a good segue, is I'm actually using the GitHub API to use a GitHub repo as my entire backend. So
okay.
when you log in to open source, it creates this repo called open source goals. It's the only repo we create, and it's the only repo we have access to. And it's through some the way the API works. You can specifically only ask for that data. But you can already see 4 seconds ago, I've added this issue called MT Foley PR compliance action. Here, it's a blank little issue.
Right.
But this is how I've hacked not being able, like, I don't want to use a database. I don't want to store anybody's data. I just want to give you the tools to make this work in your own instance. So I'm using a GitHub repo as the backbone of everybody's stuff. In the background, what just happened, what you just saw, it said sync in progress. It actually was running a GitHub action, and I've got some open source /actions as my repository. And what it does, it actually adds it to my local database. So inside of my open source.goals, that action just populated this file called data.json. And the reason I do this is because of caching reasons and not hitting the GitHub API too much because of rate limiting. But if I go to here, you can see I'm caching some data inside of a JSON blob. So like the star count, how many issues, how many forks, and the name of the repo. And that's what gets updated and pulled into the actual front end of the app. So if I hit refresh or whatever, it's just going to have the data directly from that JSON. So much faster than hitting the API every single time.
So I'm looking at this project and I'm just thinking, like, you just turned GitHub into like a legit application platform, right?
Yes.
So because here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to assume that you're hosting on GitHub Pages. I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
And then
I'm actually not. I'm actually.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
Yeah. So in the terms and conditions, something you didn't know about GitHub is GitHub Pages. You can't have a commercial product on GitHub Pages. So usually it's reserved to like open source projects. But at the time I was building this, the real reason why, because it's not a commercial product, the real reason is because I used to work at a company called Netlify, and it's hosted on Netlify because that's where I worked at the time when I built this.
Okay, so let's forget the hosting part. So you're using issues as a database, and you have like some type of logic, right? Like implemented inside of GitHub Actions. So I'm guessing, and then you're using the GitHub API as well. So like your front end is pretty much just only talking to GitHub. Like GitHub do stuff for me, and GitHub essentially is your backend for the entire application. Like, so you're not running Node, you're not running serverless functions in the cloud or anything like that. You're just doing stuff in GitHub. Yeah,
and this is as a DevRel person, I kind of over-engineered this a little bit. So like when you mentioned serverless functions, GitHub Actions is kind of my serverless function. So the thing that like I could run this in an Azure function or in whatever function that you serviced as a service. But that action that's actually doing the caching of the goals, it actually checks for any issue. So if you're familiar with the GitHub Actions, let me take a step back and explain that since it got introduced. GitHub Actions are a way to automate portions of your workflow. So most people think of things like CI or CD. That's relevant. And yes, I can run tests, but also I can automate pieces of connection and webhooks to GitHub's repositories, to its API, to its data. So what I'm doing now is every time there's an issue opened, I'm going to basically update the data.json that I showed you with all those repos. And the way I'm doing this is I've actually got some, I've got a script. Sorry, I'm actually blanking. I just remembered I did have a script that I embedded in my YAML, but recently we made a change over the summer to make this work independently. So if someone wanted to reuse this, and I realize, sorry, URLs are hard.
That's fine.
This is the action that I was pointing to here. So I'm using this action. It used to be embedded a JavaScript in this repo, but for reusability purposes, now I've got a repo called Actions. And inside this repo, I've got a goals caching. And then inside of there, I've got a Docker file, and I've got some JavaScript that essentially is doing all that power. So when I'm talking about actions, like, CI/CD, but also scripting. So think of all those like random things you have to do when you publish something up on Azure or on something in production.
Cool. Right.
You could have post-production hooks. You could have pre-production hooks. You could have staging environments. You could all set up all that with the power of GitHub Actions. So here's a bit of code that talks to the GitHub API directly and does that update of the file.
So one of the things I'm seeing here is, so on GitHub, like, so usually when I think about GitHub, right, from the perspective of a developer, I don't usually keep my build artifacts in there, right? Like my final output, like I usually have that generated in my CI/CD. But like looking at this, because your action is a part of the process. It looks like this particular file, and I'm bringing this up because this looks like a Webpack file, like a file that has run through
Yeah.
the Webpack processor, which, you know, why it
has.
looks the way that it does. And so now you have to have like the file that you actually want to distribute in the action in the repo. But now, like, whenever you point to that action, whenever you reference it in another workflow, GitHub is just going to package it up. I noticed you had a Docker file in there. So I'm guessing the Docker file references that distribution folder and then, you know, just does whatever work you asked it to do.
Yeah. And I would say that I'm going to do some hand waving just for not getting too detailed.
Yeah.
But all this is covered in our documentation on building actions. I've also got a bunch of YouTube videos. So I'll say hello in the YouTube chat, as well as in the Twitch chat as well. So if you want to follow through and find my YouTube that way. But what I'm getting at is like the Docker file is really just to package things, have it run on the action runner. But that's not the only way you can do it. This was the original way. Now you could actually run actions just from specifically from different repos, from a JavaScript file. And like my best example, actually, I'll point out to, which again, more stuff maybe you didn't know about GitHub. But if I go into my profile, which is bdougie on GitHub, I've actually gone through the process of recreating Myspace on my profile.
Nice.
And it's actually a lot of fun. And the one thing I wanted to point out is like how I'm running this right here. So here I've got 1,411 followers. You could also, and I do this intentionally, but if I click this, I'll be off by maybe 1 or 2 followers. And the way this works is the Myspace page is that we have this thing called a profile README. So you can update your profile and have whatever context you want. And it comes from my bdougie README. And that's what this is. Yeah. And the way that works is I've got a GitHub action that goes and fetches my follower account. So here I got followers, and this concept is like the idea of the reason. So I had open source goals. That's a third-party action. I was pulling in the third-party action from somewhere else. So actions could be open source and et cetera. Right. This right here, I'm actually running a little JavaScript right here. I'm a big JavaScript person. I don't know if it shows, but I'm running a JavaScript file directly from this repo. And the way I'm doing that is I'm actually using this other action, which is a third-party action, which is called setup node. And it allows me to run JavaScript. So there's a setup C#, or I think it's a C# one. It might be .NET. I don't remember what it's called. But there's also a setup Ruby. There's a setup Python. Like there's all these actions that allow you to run quick scripts in the language of your choice. So to further point out this sort of question that you had earlier about how this sort of runs, this update follower count, I'm now using this to update the follower count inside of my README. So I find the README, that point where it says follower count, replace it. And that's exactly how this works. So I've got some node package
like the
that
GitHub API and then make the call.
Yeah. Yep. Finding out what my follower is at that point. And actually they've improved this. I'll go to check my followers. So here I clicked on this tab briefly earlier, but this is where all my action workflows are. So if you don't have any actions, we'll recommend some actions for you. So for like simple CI stuff. But I have this workflow event called Workflow Dispatch, which I'll show you in a sec. It actually allows me to run actions on demand. So I don't have to wait for like committing to the project to test this, which is really nice. So I just triggered that action. What's going to happen is this action is now going to run in a hosted environment. It's only going to take 27 seconds. I should mention that GitHub Actions, you only get 2,000 minutes for free. But because this is 27 seconds, I can run this 4,000 times and I'd still be good to go. I'd have a couple more runs. So for the most part, if you can run stuff, automation things that quick, then you should be good to go. And I'm just a heavy automator. So as I mentioned, 1411, we just bumped that up to 1417.
Nice. So that quota you mentioned is for per month, correct?
Yes.
Per month quota? Okay.
Per month per your entire organization. So if I'm bdougie, I get 2,000 minutes. Technically, if I'm a paid, or if I'm an organization, I get 3,000 minutes. So open source gets 3,000. And then if I pay, the number bumps up, which I don't actually have that number committed to memory when it is. But
it's an important distinction. So it's not per repo, but it's per account. right?
Yes,
So like
per account,
your
yes.
like if it's your personal account, like you have a fixed quota throughout all of your repos. But then now
Yeah.
if you have a paid subscription or you're part of an organizational subscription, then the numbers change based on whatever tier you happen to be on.
Yeah, and I'd also mention too is like it's a generous amount too as well. So if you're doing this only on your personal accounts, unless you're doing some hefty automation or you're testing, I don't know, maybe you're testing your app in multiple browsers or every single version of .NET known
Mhm.
from history, like
Right.
that's going to boost up minutes. And then the question is like, do you really need this, or should you have a conversation with the sales team at that point?
Right. So we got a quick comment coming in from YouTube. This person says the next best feature would be to embed music when you access someone's profile, like on the High Five. That's funny.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's already exist.
Oh, does it?
So we had actually GitHub Actions, Spotify. We had a hackathon, a couple of hackathons for GitHub Actions, encouraging folks to build GitHub Actions. Yeah, I'm going to say it's probably, I think it was on the dev too. Now I'm just going to live Google Food to see if I can. I think this is it. Push changes. Yeah, so you'll probably have to do a little bit of searching, but there is a person who had on their profile, it actually showed what they were playing on Spotify. And then it would actually, you click through it, it actually open up your Spotify and listen to the song that they're listening to. Cool little interaction embedded inside their profile, powered by GitHub Actions. Apologies, I don't know what to Google to get that to come up. It definitely was on dev too, but maybe I'll drop it in the comments of the video after the fact.
Cool. And then we got one more comment or question coming in from YouTube as well. Is there a trick for GitHub wide search that searches for, say, a key within a JSON file? So I'm guessing this person wants to search JSON properties. Is there a thing in GitHub that allows you to search keys in JSON files?
So that's a very extremely specific question that I would probably just go ahead and defer you to the GitHub community. And this is where now support forums, a lot of folks, they look at that like, oh man, I wish I could just DM Brian and get my answer right away. And unfortunately, I don't always have the answers. But you know who does have the answers? Our support team. So I'd actually ask that question here because our product team, our engineers, they all spend time circulating in there. So if you want a specific answer like that, our documentation team as well, it'd be better suited to actually ask here.
Got it. Cool. All right, cool. So that sounds good. So what else can we look at? I know you mentioned, so far you mentioned GitHub Actions. You talked a little bit about using like that GraphQL API, which sounds really cool. And then I think you also showed us how to use issues as a database, which blew my mind right now that you're using an issue database,
I mean,
which is cool.
You could also use issues as a blog post, which I'm going to go a little off script and talk about my personal site, which is BDougieLive. Live. I don't write a lot of blog posts. I used to write tons of blog posts back in the day, but it sort of fell off, and I'm trying to get back into it. But what I like to do is like write a little like update on what I'm working on. So like I was working on some actions to kind of organize my life, organize automating, like telling people what I'm streaming on next, because I stream every Wednesday and Friday. So that's what I did here, and I wrote up I've been meaning to fix this UI for the longest time, and I'm always embarrassed when I open this. Hopefully, I'll do this weekend. I'm super embarrassed. I'll fix it. But this is a blog post of how I leverage GitHub projects to identify what I'm working on, also using GitHub Actions. This might be mind blowing, and maybe it's not. Maybe you're used to this at this point, but my entire website is powered by GitHub. So everything on BDougie/live gets put up on bdougie.live. So all my blog posts, whenever I have the publish label on it, it actually tells my site to basically publish that on the homepage of my site. So here I've got two posts published. And like if I don't necessarily need people to like read everything I want to talk about all the time. So I always unpublish things, and then I'll just share like a proper blog post. But it's like so much faster to go deploy a new blog page to not deploy a new blog page and just write it as an issue. So the other one that was up there was rebuilding actions, Netlify with GitHub Actions. I did that, and I could show that as well in my Slaybot repo. But I just wanted to have like automatic deploys and kind of copy this that Netlify does and do that with GitHub Actions. And that's exactly what it did. And also to kind of further hammer on the point, this is my project board, which was briefly shown up on the page. The way this works is if I have a bunch of issues that are post, everything that I sort of think I'm going to actually talk about or I want to stream about, I'll actually just move it over here. And that actually triggers a GitHub action. So remember, GitHub, actually, I don't think I mentioned this. GitHub Actions is a combination of primitives on GitHub, so API and webhooks. So one of the primitives is whenever there's a card moved on project boards, it will then send the update to my website and read but deploy a new version that then will basically say, this is what I'm streaming about.
Nice.
And actually what it did is actually added this label called live. So when I move it from here to here, it adds this label called live. And then what that does is actually, let me move that back real quick because I'm not going live. I'm live here, so I can't be live over there.
Right.
Would it?
So when you move it back, does it take it off?
It takes off the label, yes.
Oh, nice.
And I have another action that's basically watching for any projects that have that label. And then what that does, it goes to my Discord, because I have a Discord for my community, and sends an update and says, hey, B-Dougie's going live. Here's what he's talking about. Read up on the details here. And that's a ton of interactions. The way I'm doing that is also shout out. I mentioned there's an action called GitHub Script, and it allows you to write JavaScript in YAML, which is kind of awful. But for like quick 10-line things, like when I want to basically write to that file, result.json, it's like a nice place to just throw a script until I want to test it or make it bigger of a deal, like I did previously.
Right. So when you write scripts like that, do you get access to like the environment variables and those types of things when you write the script like that? Oh,
yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I'll touch on that in a second. I just wanted to point out that I'm using this guy. I don't know who this person is, but they have an action that's open source under this repo. And this is the message that goes up there, which is it mentions my notification squad, which is the team, anybody who wants to be notified. And it says, hey, I would be live at 1 p.m. Doing the thing. And just to point out as well, here is a GitHub action, the GitHub action I'm actually leveraging, which is also open source in Stannard.
Okay.
But your note you made as well of being able to access environment variables and stuff like that. So with GitHub Actions, we do have the ability to, yes, add environment variables, which could also in environments. I went to the wrong place. I don't have any. I do have some. So I have repository secrets. Here we go. Mm-hmm. So I've got my Discord webhook that's actually stored in an environment variable that talks to Discord. The way that works here is I just missed that. Wow, we talked about a lot so far. I was actually wasn't sure if we'd cover too much or if we get out of the action rabbit hole, but
yeah. But no, this is great.
Yeah, so the way I have access that secret is just by this little flag. It's in YAML, so you'll have to do these like $ stuff. And sorry, bash or whatever. Y'all can correct me in the chat if I'm not making sense, but that's the Discord webhook right here.
Got it. Nice. And so then you do secrets you pull that out of your GitHub environment variables.
Yeah.
So you can start using those in the rest of your action. Cool.
Yeah, and since we're here, I also mentioned that access to environment variables are only for folks who have write access to the repository. So if you open an issue on my repo, you will not have access to my Discord webhook because you don't have write access to my repo. And this is for security reasons, you just don't give access to everybody to have access to that stuff. If for whatever reason you wanted to give access to people for like open source folks to have access to stuff like that, normally it'd be like pull request. But if you wanted to give access, you add the target. And what that does is like takes your fork and then lets you have access to my secrets for specifically this use case for opening, editing, synchronizing, and reopening PRs. And then the further hammer on the security point, I'm also limiting permissions. So any secrets that get provided here, I only want to provide to have write access to the PR and not the code. So like a bunch of flags you can add here to like kind of have fine-grained permissions. This is a newer feature. It was shipped early this year, like in May. And it comes up, the question comes up a lot is how to run your actions and PRs. on the GitHub YouTube, I have a whole like 30-minute spiel talking about how to do this. And I'd highly recommend people to check that out too as well.
Cool. Nice. Now, I know one of the things that we kind of mentioned as well that GitHub can do is there's that discussions feature. And I don't know how long that feature's been here. It might have been a year, maybe this year. I don't remember. But I remember when it came out, I was really excited about it because prior to this, like, so I had another stream I was doing with one of my coworkers, and we were doing it every Wednesday. And we were using issues as like the discussion tab to like take notes, right? Like we're taking notes and issues. And whenever discussions happen, we're like, this is perfect. Let's just like move all our issues over to discussions, at least our issues that weren't really issues, right? And then that's been a really good way for us to kind of like box certain types of content in different places, you know what I mean? Like have areas of focus, but then also to, know that, hey, we're going to be able to have, a little bit more of a lively threaded conversation with folks.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, I was gonna say you use it too, right? In your stuff.
Yeah. So open source, we do use Discussions. Discussions, the feature got shipped last year, and it gives you an opportunity to. Normally with issues, like there's usually some actionable items. Like if you're a large project, it's kind of hard to do Stack Overflow inside of, and I say Stack Overflow as the platform. Like people ask questions, you give them an answer inside of an issue because it doesn't scale. So a lot of folks punt people to somewhere else, which is Stack Overflow. So with Discussions, it gives you a place to say, okay, if you have a question, you have ideas or features, open up a discussion and let's go from there. So for example, I'm using Discussions, and on stream, I came up with this idea of like, hey, I would love every time I open up a pull request, I'd love to check to see if there's a linked issue to that pull request. And you might not be aware of this as well. So when you open up a PR, so here is, I made a call out to the note box that was broken. This person's actually fixing it too as well. So here's the broken version. He's actually fixing it right now. I think it's already fixed. But the linked PRs, there's this little, and this is all documented inside the GitHub. There's these key code words of like fixes or close or reopen. And then you put the $ in the issue. It actually points to the issue that this person is working on. And what that does, it goes over here to the linked issues and adds it right here. So imagine you have multiple issues you're trying to fix in this one pull request. You could link them all here. You can do it manually as well. So if you wanted to go here and then type in 1, 2, 3, you can actually add the issue. And this is something I request everybody who contributes, because I get a lot of contributors and I can't go through everything and try to figure out, is this code good? Also, like if I merge this in, can I find you to like fix it in the future if it's like a hefty feature? Right. So my ask is open an issue first so we can have a conversation if it's a legitimate feature. If you just want to chat about a feature, open up a discussion. But the goal is really do this right here. Right. And if this is not done, I want actually a GitHub action to comment on the PR before, like if I'm sleeping, just comment on the PR and say, hey, you didn't link an issue. Could you do that? And if they don't link an issue, then we'll actually do close the PR itself and to say thank you, but like you'll have to follow the rules in the contributing MD. So that's what this conversation is. A discussion was opened. We went like briefly in a conversation. Actually, we kind of took it to Discord, to be quite honest. So a lot of this conversation is missing because we have a Discord. But the result of that is this, which is, here you go. Which is Matt actually created a GitHub action to check for that one thing, the issue thing. And basically he has a bunch of features that he wants to do. And the beauty of this is I don't have to maintain this. Like Matt now is introducing this to my project. He's got all these features. He can triage all the new stuff. Looks like he had a couple PRs too as well. But yeah, so now anybody who opens up a new project that doesn't have this, they get a comment on the PR and says, hey, here, them are the rules. Could you please add an issue or a linked issue?
So until you said something about it, I swear to you, I have never seen linked issues in the UI before.
Okay.
It's one of those, hey, I've been using this tool for so long, and then someone shows you something like right in front of your face and you're like, I've never seen that. Like, has that button been there the whole time? And I swear I've never seen linked issues on the right side before. So that's good that it's there. One other thing I would ask too is, So we have linked issues. Can you link discussions? Is that a thing, or is it just not a part of the workflow? Does that not make sense?
Not yet. So discussions, it's about a year old, roughly, and it's getting new features. So pay attention to GitHub Universe. In a couple of weeks, there'll be some updates to GitHub Discussions. So like one of the updates that obviously that's well, maybe not even obvious, is things like marking answers. So like Matt actually solved this problem for us. He introduced it, but also he solved it. So like to mark that answer. So then if I go to the UI and I refresh because of caching reasons, you'll see that this is answered. And then if I'm a contributor and like, hey, I want to get involved, but I don't know where, there's a bunch of unanswered conversations all throughout the project that you can jump in on and help out for things like setting up prettier. Like people want that, but I'm not an expert at that. So maybe you are. Join the discussion. And if the discussion's now getting lively, we've got this little feature which is called create an issue from discussion. I can create that issue because now we have the entire conversation logged from here. It's going to create an issue. It's going to link this discussion. I probably should have prepared better. Yeah, but to the issue. And then, so I guess the answer is yes. You can link discussions because everything's got a number. So if I do 1124, it will link to the discussion and not a random issue.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah, that's a really cool feature. I didn't know that was there either. Another button you showed me that like I didn't know existed. So that's
and like even on issues, there's like these little things like pending issues. So this is discussions. So what we did here, if I go back to discussions, I can pen. Oops, there we go. I can pen discussions here. So I just basically I asked, I don't know what this was. Oh, Twitch tonight, blah blah. I don't remember what this was. But no one's actually, oh, that's what it is. I have this whole idea for setting up a new bot for open source. So that way, when you go to open source and you have nothing to like look at, or maybe you don't have any stars, we'll start recommending stuff to you. So the way I'm going to do this is very similar to how I'm using a backend inside of repos. I want to encourage maintainers to install open source as an app. So this app that logs you in to open source, that could also be installed on repos. And if you do that, then we could also we can basically identify projects who have opted in to be shared for contributing. So like these are kind of like our original projects that we've sort of been hanging out. Shout out to Git Trends and Brandon. We actually had him on the stream a couple months ago. It's actually a Xamarin project, and they're open source fans, and it's a great project that could definitely use documentation help at the moment.
Nice. So can you so another question about discussions. I'm guessing you could label and filter discussions. I'm guessing like I could call this I don't know, discussion A, discussion B. Like can I do that? Because I think we can kind of put tags on. I know we can put tags on issues. Can we do that with discussions?
So you could have categories. So I've got these different categories. I should probably make some better ones because these are I started discussions before we had categories. So these are all generic ones. But also, yes, you could label discussions. And I laugh because it's a feature that just got shipped in beta. It'll be public for most people in the next couple of weeks. So I'm like struggling to mention this because I forget what's actually public for folks. But someone keep me honest if you have labels on your discussions pages. I might have gone live to everybody already.
Okay, cool. All right,
so here are the labels.
All right, so we've seen a whole bunch of stuff. There's one last thing I wanted to ask you about that we briefly mentioned, and that was packaging. Like you'd mentioned packaging. Yeah. Well, before we got on stream, we were talking about packaging a little bit. Does open source have use like GitHub Actions to create packages or releases or any of those types of things?
Yeah, we certainly do. And I corrected you because like we didn't use GitHub Pages for open source proper.
Yeah.
But we do use GitHub Pages for the other ones like docs.opensource.pizza. So real quick, let me show that first. I'll show you the action that actually deploys that to GitHub Pages. And the reason for doing that is because GitHub Pages needs a static site. And what we're using is Dockersaurus, which is a Gatsby-inspired React app. So when we do the release one, there is a GitHub action. one. He's Iris, which is he's actually makes a ton of GitHub Actions, so he's definitely a person to follow on GitHub if you're interested. But this actually, what it does, it builds our doc site, which our doc site is basically this. And our doc site, it's really just to give you tips on how to contribute to open source, but also how to use open source. So that's what that is. I have a little video for folks to get introduced to that. So that's GitHub Pages. And the other thing is that we also leverage things like artifacts. So real quick, let's go to the packages. And this will answer your package question. So might not be necessary, but what we do is we package up previous versions of the site. And then we, like most people, if you have like a VS Code extension or you have a library that you have on GitHub, you'll cut a release and you'll upload a tarball or compress it and have it like downloadable. With GitHub Packages, you can do the same thing. It's just sort of built in. So rather than do that manually, you could actually upload a version of the open source.pizza site. And now it's up here live. So we can see all the previous versions of the doc site, which gets uploaded, and it's all being leveraged inside of GitHub Actions. So kind of answer your question quicker than what I've done so far, is that it's all laid out here under the deploy job, which I didn't explain earlier. You get 22 jobs per action workflow. So I could have 22 of these flags. So I've got a cleanup, I've got a deploy, I've got a release section, which also bundles it up, uploads an artifact to the GitHub repo, downloads that artifact, puts it up to the package, the GitHub packages, and then at the last one, the cleanup basically deletes the artifact.
Nice. We had a question really quick. I was like, the audience has been quiet, and I'm like, no, I just haven't been looking. We had a question real quick that I want us to get to. Is there a way to debug GitHub Actions?
Yes. So not an elegant
a good answer.
way.
Yes.
Yes. It's not elegant. Debugging GitHub Actions. I have a blog post on dev, and I also have a YouTube video. Which, man, let's see if I'm the first one that shows up. Maybe someone else has solved it better. Okay, so 3 tips for debugging GitHub Actions. That's a good place to start. Because I go quickly into like how you can approach that. I don't have time to explain all of them, but the Nectos Act repository lets you debug them locally in your own machine. We've got another one where you could actually use Teammate to basically get inside the action runner and get console messages back. And then we have another one where you could use Docker. So if you're familiar with Docker, you can also run actions locally that point to what's up on GitHub as well. I cover those 3 ones. The other way you could also do is self-hosted runners, which at this point, I'll just point to the documentation, self-hosted GitHub action runners. In the docs, there's an explanation on how to do that. And if you're running your own self-hosted runner, either locally or up in the cloud, you can also debug that way as well.
Nice. So like you said, if I wanted to, I don't know, let's say I'm running Docker, right? Like I could pull down the runner, and I'm sure I could pass it configuration through environment variables or something, right? Some mechanism. And then now I could, like you said, I could like kind of look through that output to kind of see what it's actually doing before I decide to like, put it into GitHub proper and run it there.
Yeah. And again, I prefaced that explanation to, it's not elegant. I would say keep an eye out on some change logs. So if you want to stay up to date, github.blog. Oh man, typing is hard today. /changelog. This is where we ship all of our like small updates to actions. I believe you could actually filter by actions, but I forget how to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, here we go. Well, we'll just click on the tag. So these are all the updates of actions, and they're pretty frequent. So I will just say debugging is going to get easier soon. It's just not ready yet.
Not ready yet. Got it. Cool. Awesome. Let me see. Do we have any more questions from folks? I'm going to check in and see what's happening in the chat. No, it looks like that's about it. We have a lot of folks just chatting about like how amazing this is. Folks are talking about, they've definitely learned things that they haven't seen before. So that's always a positive for sure. Brian, it's been great having you on. do you have any like final things that you'd want folks to look out for, check out? I know we spoke about GitHub Universe, but like outside of Universe, what else do you have like kind of happening and going on?
Yeah, honestly, GitHub Universe is going to be a big thing. My team on the DevRel side has been really putting a lot of effort into things like YouTube. So like answering a lot of these questions from folks today. It's easy because we've been answering these questions for the past year on YouTube. So usually like these questions, there's a question about source searching as well that came through on the Twitch side. Like, yes, GitHub has search has always been an issue, but other like we don't mind recommending other things like what I've completely just blanked on the SourceForge is definitely not it. But there's other third-party tools that integrate with GitHub, and the way that works is because GitHub has such a prolific API that allows integrating into the platform so much easier. But what I wanted to mention is that we are piping up, like we're uploading YouTube videos daily at this point. So if you're at all interested in keeping up to date on open source, like here I had an interview with the open source maintainer on Open Source Friday, or if you just want to learn about our newest feature, which is automated release, which I thought that would have came up naturally in the conversation. It didn't. Watch this video with me and Miles, the PM, and hopefully that will help you.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Anything else going on? Surly Dev says Atlassian source tree. So that might have been what you were talking about. The source tree desktop tool. So yeah, so if folks are interested in just trying something else that's different, then they could definitely check that out.
Yeah.
So I guess my last words would be for folks, if you like all this cool stuff Brian has been talking about, definitely check out his YouTube. I think he showed us his YouTube link before. You also mentioned you stream every Wednesday and Friday. So that means you're streaming tomorrow, I'm going to guess, on Twitch. So make sure you follow him for that. And you can also follow him on Twitter and then all the social places on GitHub and all those things to kind of find out what he's doing. But with that being said, I guess that's it. That's a wrap, man. Thank you, Brian, for being in the show. This was fun. Appreciate it. I learned a lot. I know everyone in the chat learned a lot. Maybe after GitHub Universe, after Universe happens, we can have you come back to give us like here's all the magic things that happened that you want us to pay attention to.
Yeah, always happy to. There's going to be a lot we're talking about in the universe, so we'll have to check out the sort of recap if you don't catch it live, and hopefully I'll see you in one of the talks I'm giving.
Awesome. All right, Brian. Well, again, it's been great, and see you all next week for whenever we do on .NET Live next week, Thursday. All right, so bye, everyone.